We're going to turn it over now to Daniel Bell as he shares this morning's message with us.
Welcome, wherever you find yourself today. I'm grateful that you have joined me. I am here completely alone in our beautiful lakeside downtown building. The last time I was in this room, these pews were full of people, and now they are empty. It's quite weird, actually, being in this room where we're supposed to celebrate and sing and have a joyful time together. But here I am alone. But there's something that also seems quite normal, actually, about being alone, as I've kind of grown used to it in these times. But not only is it during these times, this season of this pandemic that we're in, that being alone feels normal, but I believe it's also part of a characteristic of our culture. You see, I don't have to argue very much to convince you that we live in an individualistic culture. You've seen that around the world. We've been raised to think about ourselves, about, our ways above other people's ways, and you can simply see this by looking at the way money is spent, the way advertisements work, the way we think, and the way we dream. There's this priority in our culture on this word, me. It's all about me, about what I want, about what I need, about what I do above other things. And you don't have to look very far right now in our time where everyone is complaining about this idea of wearing masks, right? It infringes on my rights, my comfort, my space, yet doesn't consider the lives of others. We live in a me-centered world. But I believe we're actually living in a time of history that is going to greatly challenge this culture and this ideology and this idol of self-sufficiency. The idea that I am enough, that I have it all, that I get it done on my own. I actually believe that is crumbling. And maybe there's a search for more. Maybe there is more out there. You may have seen this also recently with this growing discussion on racism, with these growing protests and a new value seen for human life. There's this collective fighting for justice, but in a me-centered world, we will not see an end to injustice. And what I want to propose today is that me isn't working. Me, this idea of the world being about me, is not working. But I believe we can turn a me-centered world on its head and find something much better, a we-centered world. And I want to propose that we is actually the way forwards over me, that me isn't enough. We is how we're actually meant to live. In fact, it's one of our core values here at Lakeside. We believe that everyone can experience community. And I also think that maybe you felt this too, even more so in our current cultural climate, in the midst of this pandemic. And as we continue to move forwards into the next stages of it, maybe you're asking these questions on what does life look like as we go forwards. But we is where we need to be, and I'm going to argue that with you today. I'm going to propose that we is where we need to go because we is a place of rest. When we get tired, me doesn't help us, but we helps carry us. Others around us help carry us when we are tired. We is a place of healing, where we have the opportunity to be a salve for others, where we can be a healing balm for others and they can do the same for us. We is a place to be heard. No one enjoys talking to themselves for very long, but when we are together with others, our voices are heard and we hear their voices as well. We is a place of transformation. When we enter into community, we encounter views and perspectives and ideas and voices that are different than our own. And that can cause us to become transformed and changed into a better idea and picture of what God has for us. Not only does change and transformation happen personally, but also community-wide and globally when we interact with other people. We is a place of transformation and change, and we is a way of living beyond ourselves. You see, we don't really like selfish people, do we? We complain about them, but when we have a different perspective on life, a focus on the other, on the outside of ourselves, then we begin to live a more selfless life. We, I would argue, we is a place of wholeness, that we are not meant to live alone, that we are not meant to focus only on ourselves, but that we are actually designed to live in community and in relationship with others. In fact, I would argue that we is how we were created to be. We is how we were created to be. I want to leave you with that phrase. We is how we were created to be, or an even simpler one is, we is the place to be. I know it's cheesy, but here you go. We is the place to be. See, we believe that God exists in relationship in triune, the Godhead, and he also relates with us. But here's the thing. We are heading into a new era, a new time, a different way of living. And many of us have been asking this question. When will life return to normal? When will things get back to how they used to be? And when they do, will it even be the same? What will change? I want us to ask a different question. And that question is, should things go back to normal? Should things be the same as they were? Are there ways that we can move forward into these next stages and into the future differently? To move forwards in healthier and stronger ways? And specifically, what does that look like for the church to move forwards in new and different ways as we head into the next stages of this pandemic and towards a hopefully brighter future? And so I want to take some time with you to look at another chaotic time in history, especially for the church. And that time was the beginnings of the church. And here we find the church in a nation ruled by the Roman Empire, where there's these culture wars, these religious battles, this sense of displacement. And then there's this new birth of this movement that is mostly despised and rejected by people. And I want to pick us up in the book of Acts this morning. It's found in the New Testament of your Bibles. If you don't own a Bible, there's a fantastic app if you search your app store called Bible. If you open it up, it's great. And you can find this there as well in the book of Acts. We're going to jump into chapter 2 in a moment. But just for some context, what happens in the first chapter is that Jesus connects with his disciples, with his followers. And then he ascends up into heaven. He disappears into heaven and he promises them that the Spirit will come. They receive the Spirit. Amazing things happen. Peter preaches this awesome sermon. And in the end of his sermon, in Acts chapter 2, verse 41, we read these words. It says, "So those who received his word were baptized, and there were added to that day about 3,000 souls." Talk about a good sermon. I don't know if I've ever preached a sermon where 3,000 people came to know the Lord and were baptized right then, but that would be pretty powerful. I can't believe the authority that God gave Peter in that moment. But what happens next? 3,000 people come and hear about Jesus. And do they then return to their homes and do they then just carry on with their me and God kind of life? Or does something else happen? Well, let's look. Let's continue reading on in verse 42. It says this. It says, "And they, all of them, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers." I love that word, devoted. We use that word a lot when we talk about marriages, relationships, friendships, and those sort of things, devoted. And this idea, the word devoted, the idea of devoted here means to persist in, to stay close to. In a sense, the way I like to read it is that it means to cling to something. I kind of think of an expedition. I want you to imagine that we're heading out together on this journey through the rainforest. And I've never been there. Maybe you have, but I know that if I'm heading into the rainforest, I'm going to need a guide. So we take a guide with us, an expert in the rainforest, and they're telling us the way to head. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cling to them, maybe even physically hold on to them, but I'm going to stay close to them. And I'm going to say, show me the way, because I'm not getting eaten by a spider, a snake, or some other wild beast. Yes, spiders are beasts. But anyways, I'm going to cling to them. I'm going to follow them. And that's what I believe that is happening in this context, that they are clinging to these things, that they are clinging to this sense of community that they have. And I want to ask you this question. As we move forward through the next stages of this pandemic and towards hopefully an end to it, what are we going to cling to? What are you going to cling to? Where will you grab a hold of and move forwards? The first thing that it says that they were devoted to was the apostles' teaching Now, I find it quite interesting because in this context, they were literally in the presence of the apostles, the Jesus' closest followers, the ones he had appointed to lead the church. And I kind of sometimes wonder, well, of course it was easy for them to follow. They had sort of the best super Christians of all time there with them to show them the way. But what about us? What do we have? How do we follow the apostles' teaching? Well, one way we can do so, I believe, is through the scriptures that we have been given. It is the recorded words of Jesus and his close followers, the apostles themselves. And we are given those words to follow. And in order to follow someone, you need to be within earshot of them. You need to be able to hear their directions. And I believe that is one way that we are able to hear from God. There are a variety of ways we can hear from God, but that is one way we can follow the teachings of Jesus. But the next word that is used is this word fellowship. And maybe, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, if I went to a church or some sort of, Christian campground or some religious sort of place, the word fellowship was always used to describe a room. I remember we're going to the fellowship room now to have our coffees and cookie, or we're going to the fellowship hall to play basketball. But what does fellowship mean? Does it simply just mean like hanging out, having fun, eating cookies and playing basketball, hanging out with friends and that sort of thing? Well, I believe it's a word we often improperly use and fail to see the beauty of. And the original word for this is the word koinonia. And it has this idea of participating in, joining in, sharing in, connecting to, connecting between, and connecting for each other. In the following verses, we're going to illustrate this a little bit more, but it gives us this sense of two lives intertwined, or of multiple lives intertwined, participating in the lives of each other. I love that word, participating in. We don't just witness each other's lives happen, but we actually play a role in the lives of others, and they play a role in our lives as well. And so what could it mean for us to participate in other people's lives in a loving way and allow them to participate in our lives? What could real fellowship look like for us? The next phrase that is used is this phrase, the breaking of bread. Breaking of bread. And does this mean communion? Does it mean sharing meals together? I would argue that it could mean both. And next week, Robin is going to spend some time talking to us about communion, so make sure you check in for that. But I want to talk a little bit about food right now, because I believe that sharing meals is such an intimate and wonderful thing. And perhaps that is one of the things I am grieving most right now, the ability to sit across from a table with someone and share a meal with them, to look them in their eyes, to eat together, to laugh and enjoy each other's company over a good meal. And I think maybe some of you are feeling that way too. Maybe you're missing that idea of being together with other people. But I know as things are beginning to change, I'm starting to make a list of who am I going to have over for dinner? Who do I want to invite first? And I'm sorry if it's not you. I'll just pretend it was you. But I want to have this meals with people. And maybe you do too. I would maybe encourage you to start thinking about who can I eat with? Who can I spend time with? Who can I participate? Because I think eating together creates an opportunity for vulnerability, creates an opportunity for conversation, because you're stuck at the table, spending time, getting to know each other a little more, doing life together. And so finally, the next word that is used is this word prayers. And of course, if you've been at church for any sort of time, or you've been to a church, or even if you have social media, you've heard about this idea of prayer. Maybe you've prayed yourself as well. And one thing that always comes to my attention about prayer is that it's this idea that I will pray for you, or that I will pray, or that I am praying. This sense of prayer seems to be individualistic. Prayer seems to be this thing we do alone and in private, and there are great reasons that happens. But I want you to imagine that if our prayer lives were less about praying alone and more about praying for, praying with, and praying over others, how that might change the way we relate to each other. What if you took some time to pray with someone? I know that seems intimidating and scary, because a lot of us, we don't like praying out loud. We don't like hearing the sound of our voice. We don't feel like we have the right words. But what if you just took some time just to bare your soul, just to be yourself, just to talk to God like he was your loving father or a good close friend, but pray on behalf of someone else, to pray with someone else, to pray over someone else, and to pray blessing into their life? Imagine how that could change your relationships. It might be a bit awkward at first, but I think it would be a real blessing if we began as a church praying over each other more often. And so after this verse where they list 4 things, we continue on, and it says, "And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all, as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts. So the first thing I noticed, this says that this community was impacted with awe, because there were signs and wonders, and there was this supernatural presence of the Spirit among them. Something crazy awesome was happening. And it says that they were together and that they had everything in common. And it doesn't say that they were selling every single thing they had and giving it away, but rather it implies that they are participating in the lives of each other and helping to meet the needs that others had. That they were looking into the needs of others and said, oh, you don't have lunch today? Here, I have double lunch. I'm going to share some with you. Oh, you don't have, a bed to lay on? Well, here, I'm going to cut mine in half and give half to you, whatever it was. Or I have an extra mattress. They're looking at the lives of those around them and seeking to meet the practical needs of those in community with them. And Lakeside, I have seen such beautiful generosity in so many of you during this time. I've seen so many of you reach out to others. I've seen so many of you bless those in need. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that as we move forward, to continue to invest in other people and to have a generous heart towards seeing their lives impacted by the very essential needs that they need. And so it says that they were attending the temple daily. And I know that we aren't able to do that right now, especially that we aren't, able to fill these seats every day or at all right now. But it says another phrase, it says that they were breaking bread in homes. And I want to encourage you that, as we've said many times, the church isn't the building, but the church is the people. That literally the word ecclesia means gathering together. And I want to invite you to continue to invite people into your lives. And maybe as we go forward, that means starting a small group in your home with another family or couple or some friends, and just doing that wisely and having people over or in your backyard or meeting somewhere, doing that through Zoom or whatever works for you. But begin investing with people. Maybe consider watching the services with another family or having time through the week where you connect with others. But begin breaking bread with others, in a sense, by sharing life together as we move forwards out of this time. I believe that you will be blessed by this. What could a life less me-centered look like for you? What could a life more we-centered look like for you? What could faith look like for you if it began to focus more on the we? And I just want to spend a moment reflecting on the last verse in this passage, because it's what shows us that community isn't just about being together, about a social club, but it paints an amazing picture for us. In verse 47, it says these words. It says, praising God and having favor with all people. Praising God and having favor with all people. We'll read the rest in a second. Praising God. This is the thing I miss the most. I know I said meals is one of the things, but this is the thing I miss the most, is that praising God together, to sit with you in these seats and other places, our other site at Lakeside Central as well, and to sing praises to God together. Because we is not only a physical presence of community, it is also a spiritual presence of community. There is something special and supernatural when we gather together as believers. And that is why I'm encouraging you to begin gathering with others when it is safe and wise to do so. Because we also helps us change our perspective. We aren't so focused on ourselves and our own world, but when we are standing side by side to people who are lifting their eyes to God, it helps us lift our eyes and change our perspective as well. And then it says, having favor with all people. Doesn't that just describe the church today in our world? That everyone has such favor and love for the church. Oddly, it doesn't. But let me propose something. The less we focus on ourselves and the more we focus on others, the more that story and trend will change. The more we focus outward towards those around us, the more we will see our witness grow. In fact, Jesus prayed that we would be united, that we would be one, and that so that the world would know his love, that the world would know him because of the supernatural, weird, irrational way we care for and invest in each other's lives. And the theologian Darrell Bock says these words to describe this passage. He says, a vibrant community extends itself in two directions, towards God and neighbor. We are a community that extends both vertically towards God and horizontally towards each other and towards the world. And so finally, look at the results of a we-centered world. It says, and the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Those who were being saved. Me, I can't change the world. But maybe we can. Maybe as a community, if we seek to invest and lean into each other's lives, participate in each other's lives, we will see the world transformed by the love we are able to share in the name of Jesus. So what if? What if you intentionally began to flip the script from me to we? What if you looked at the areas in your life where you said, I focus too much on me in that area, and I need to begin focusing on others in that area, on the community in that area? What if the new normal we are heading into is a better normal, is a transformed normal, because it is less of a focus on ourselves and more of a focus on us, on we, on the world? Maybe, just maybe, if we begin to flip the script from me to we will see the world transform.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that message with us. So great. I love that you said, we is the place to be. And even if it sounds cheesy, there's so much truth there. So thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for leading us in song, and for everyone who is involved in making these online services happen. It is such a blessing, isn't it? And thank you for joining us today, wherever you're at. Whether Lakeside has been a part of your community for a long time, or this is your first time joining us, we're so glad you did. And I want to just leave you with a blessing. As Jeff said at the beginning of his time of worship, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. May God be gracious to you and give you his peace. Enjoy your day, Lakeside. We look forward to seeing you again.